Hi everyone, welcome to our session DIY Zowe Explorer Starter Kit. My name is Jessielaine Punongbayan and I'm a product marketing engineer for Broadcom and as well as a squad lead for Zowe Explorers.
And I'm Richelle Anne Craw. I'm a senior software engineer for Broadcom, and I'm also serving as the Zowe Explorer Squad Scrum Master.
So today we're going to talk about Zowe Explorer and how can you start your own extension. So our agenda for today is that we will talk about Zoe Explorer and where it fits within Zoe. We're going to talk about the Zoe Explorer extension points and the upcoming conformance criteria. We're going to show you some extender examples that we have. And of course, we're going to end up with getting started on how are you going to create your own DIY Zoe Explorer extension. But before we do that, let's start off with the basics. So let's start with Zoe. What is Zoe? So, for those who are not familiar with Zoe, Zoe is an open source project that provides tooling or modern tooling to help modernize mainframe. It is called the Modern Mainframe Bridge because it allows you to integrate modern technology to mainframe technology. And in this picture that you're seeing right now, this is the architecture, or at least the current architecture of Zoe. And let's talk about the extension points of Zoe. So in here, you can see your mainframe. And with your mainframe, you should have, let's say, maybe you should have web microservices inside this mainframe, and it provides this API services. And Zoe has four components. And the first component that we're going to look at is the API mediation layer. The API mediation layer serves as this API portal for all of these microservices that you have. And then after that one, Zoe has three different or three more components that you could use. The first one is the CLI, and the CLI has the usage of the CLI or the command line interface is for automation. So you can use CLI commands that fires the APIs from your API mediation layer and add it into your CI/CD pipeline. There are two web UI or UI components for Zoe. The first one would be the web desktop, and this desktop is used by IT ops. And the last one or the last UI component of Zoe is an IDE that is written or that you can use through VS Code, and we call that Zoe Explorer. And this enables the modern mainframe developer experience. And all of these components that you can see here, these are all extensible. And in this discussion or in this topic, we're gonna talk about Zoe Explorer and VS Code and how you can extend Zoe Explorer so that you can customize it and you can build your own and call your own APIs that resides in your own mainframe systems.
That's right. So we all know that Zoe Explorer has these core functionalities. You can interact with your ZOS datasets, your jobs, and as well as USS files, and all of those are residing on a remote mainframe instance. But Zoe Explorer is also built to be extensible, whether you have CLI plugins or language server protocol. You can build extensions on top of Zoe Explorer that will add capabilities to it. So, for example, the first extension point is a general extension. And general VS Code extensions allow you to interact with files opened with Zoe Explorer. For example, if you open a JCL member, you can add this extension and you will have capabilities to check your JCL or generate a JCL report. The next type of extension can contribute additional menus to specific Zoe Explorer tree nodes, whether that's a partition dataset or a dataset member. You can add specific menus to different Zoe nodes. Other types of extensions can also provide alternative ZOS communication protocols. Like here, we see that Zoe Explorer was modified for FTP support. So instead of using the default ZOSMF protocols, this extension will use FTP instead. And then there's also extensions that can contribute a new profile type or access the existing profile utilities, including security via the Secure Credential Store. So because there are many extension points within Zowe Explorer, there are many ways to extend Zowe Explorer. And we need to set up certain guidelines to maintain a high level of common functionality, interoperability, and user experience. And this is the basis of conformance. So what is conformance? And to define conformance is to answer the question, how can you be assured that an extension is compatible with core Zoe? And the Zoe conformance was developed by the Zoe community as a means to ensure that each plugin and extension associated with a given Zoe component has met a minimum set of requirements. It also serves as the quality gate, and those who have passed have earned a stamp of approval.
So why conformance? So let me read this statement. The Zoe Conformance Program aims to give users the confidence that when they use a product, an application, or distribution that leverages Zoe, they can expect a high level of common functionality, interoperability, and user experience. And that statement alone just answers why do we need conformance. So we need that common functionality. We need that interoperability between other products, and the users of our products has this confidence that we have a good quality code and as well as consistent user experience. This conformance benefit both the providers and the consumers.
So, how do we test which products are conformant? Each Zoe component has their own set of criteria. So when an extender applies for conformance, they need to ensure that their extension meets all of the required test criteria entries for the particular component they are extending. The screenshot we see here shows the Zoe Explorer V1 test criteria. The Zoe Explorer squad drafted and submitted this list and is responsible for maintaining it. We see here that there are items marked as required and some items marked as best practice. The Zoe onboarding squad is responsible for vetting the criteria with extenders and making sure that it is continuously updated, especially at the boundaries of a long term support release. So once the criteria is satisfied, extenders will earn the conformance badge. So in the following section, we will dive deeper into the Zoe Explorer conformance criteria.
So the Zoe Explorer conformance criteria are separated into four categories. And the first one we're going to talk about is called the general extension. So what does it mean? It means that it is a generic VS Code extension that utilizes Zoe Explorer resources in any way. And I can give you a good example for that. So in here, I have the GCL language support. And in this extension, it provides you syntax highlighting, linting, and access to like GCL snippets. So when you're creating your GCL, you will have a help in forming your own GCL. And this extension can be used on top of Zoe Explorer. So why is this extension conformant to Zoe Explorer? So the first one is that it has the Zoe publication tag. And if you go to the marketplace, you will see that as part of its tag, Zoe is right over there. And this is a required criteria for our conformance. The second and the third point is that it uses Zoe SDK and it shares profiles with its CLI counterpart. So one of the features of this extension is to call on to the CAGCL check. And that CAGCL check has its own CLI. So in order for the extension to communicate with that product, it uses Zoe SDK and it shares its profiles with with its CLI counterpart and communicate with the CAGCL check APIs. And the last one is that the support is indicated in the docs. And if you can see there, README, if you go down, it has documentation on how you can get your support for this extension.
So the next category in the Zoe Explorer conformance criteria is for extensions accessing profiles. Extensions can make use of Zowe Explorer extensibility APIs to access profiles already loaded by Zowe Explorer. The APIs included in the Profiles package implementation provides convenient access to read, write, refresh operations without the need to implement them again. And because the Profile package implementation is free of any VS Code dependencies, the APIs can be used even by non-VS Code tools like in other NPM packages such as a Zowe CLI plugin. A new profile type can also be added and registered for use within Zowe Explorer standard views or for use in a custom view like in the Kicks extension we will see next. Part of this is also a security package which contains VS Code specific APIs for initializing and accessing the secure credential store used by Zowe. So any extension could make use of those extensibility APIs without the need to implement them again in their own extension. So a good example of an extension accessing profiles is the Zowe Kicks Explorer. This Kicks extension for Zowe Explorer adds additional functionality to Zowe Explorer by allowing you to interact with Kicks regions and programs and ability to run commands against them. So this extension took advantage of the Zowe Explorer UI and extensible APIs to build their own tree view inside Zowe Explorer. When you install this extension, you can go to Zowe Explorer and you can create your own Kicks profile, access the Kicks environment, and this extension fulfilled the general extension criteria as well as some additional ones. Like they have a dependency on Zowe Explorer and they access the shared Zowe Explorer profiles cache. So let's look at a code example of an extension accessing profiles. So the first thing we see is get Zowe Explorer API with the minimum version specified. So this defines the VS Code extension dependency, and this allows access to the Zowe Explorer extensible APIs. So once this is declared, you can now use additional functions from the Get Explorer Extender APIs. For example, here, init for Zowe is used. So this utility ensures that the profile type is supported and managed by the extension without the Zowe CLI plugin installed. The next thing we see is the Get Profiles cache. And this utility accesses the Zowe Explorer Profiles cache for read and write operations. So in this way, an extension does not need to have their own profiles cache. They can use the implementation of Zowe Explorer. The next item is register custom profile types. So this utility registers a profile type that is also a valid Zowe CLI profile type, and this ensures that this extension shares a profile with Zowe CLI. So once everything is defined, you can see that there are some examples here on how you can access the profile cache of Zowe Explorer in your own extensions. You can get the default profile from the type that you declared, you can get names for the type, and you can also load them and use them in your own custom view or within the Zowe Explorer UI itself. The next category in the Zowe Explorer conformance criteria is for data provider extensions. So this type of extensions provide an alternative Zowe CLI profile type for different communication protocol for one or more Zowe Explorer views. So the default protocol Zowe Explorer uses is ZSMF REST APIs, and a data provider extension adds support for another type of API. A good example of this is the Zowe Explorer extension for FTP. And this extension is maintained by the Zowe Explorer squad. And it provides a capability to use all Zowe Explorer functionalities, but instead of using ZSMF connection, you're using FTP. The FTP extension became conformant by fulfilling the general extension criteria. And additionally, it registers its new API instances with a new profile type for the different Zowe Explorer views. It also has a matching Zowe CLI plugin, and it implements and registers to at least one of the three Zowe Explorer interfaces. So the good thing about this is, since it's maintained by the Zowe Explorer squad, Whenever there are changes to the extender APIs, the squad makes sure to test it with the ZFTP extension so we know that the changes are extender friendly. So let's look at some code samples for a data provider extension. So we see again the get Zowe Explorer API, which defines the dependency. And then we see this register MVS, USS, and JES functions, which means that it implements at least one of the four available interfaces used by the API for data providers. The FTP extension started with just using the USS API, but now the MVS and JES capabilities are also provided. So that's what we mean by at least one of the of the implementation for the API. And this registration is done using a new profile type. And that's defined by the FTP USS API, MVS, and JES. And this defines parallel implementations of the same operations that are provided by Zowe Explorer itself using the ZSMF interaction protocol. So since these types are registered in Zowe Explorer, this extension can now use them within the UI. And the last thing that I want to highlight in this slide is again the init for Zowe, which uses Explorer Extender APIs to make sure that the user does not need to have FTP CLI plugin installed. And it can also use the reload profiles to load the FTP profiles in the Zowe Explorer tree.
So the last category that we're going to talk about is extension adding menus. And these are extension that injects new menus into the existing Zoe Explorer tree views, accessing contextual information from the tree nodes. And instead of me showing you a good example of this, why not we create our own extension that will add menu? So our goal is this. Our goal is to inject two commands. One here you can see like generate max data, and the other one is set configuration. And these two commands will only be available if it's one a sequential data set, if I do right click on a sequential data set, or if I right click through a profile through a profile. And with this extension, what we're gonna do is try to fulfill this following conformance criteria. One is the new commands are not replacing the existing Zoe Explorer command, so it should be unique. Number two, the command category contains the extension name. Number three, it follows the Zoe Explorer extensibility documentation. And number four, there's a consistent terminology and naming convention. And the last one is that commands are added to the view's right-click context menu. So for you to be able to, let's say, create your startup extension, number one, you go to Visual Studio Code and get started with your first extension. Or you can copy this extension template and it will provide you already, let's say, started Hello World extension that is already connected to Zoe Explorer. So, all right, so let's get started. The first or the important thing that we should do when we want to inject a new menu inside Zoe Explorer is to set up your configuration. So I'm going to open my package.json. And in this package.json, I'm going to look for the word contributes. And in here, the contributes command or the contributes object, this contains actually the commands inside your VS Code. And if you can look at here, under commands, I have two commands. Basically, I want the generate mass data and I have this set configuration. And just by this part, we will be able to fulfill at least 50% of that conformance criteria. One is we have to have a unique command name. And the second one is that we need to have the extension name here. And that is important because we do not want to override any of the Zoe Explorer existing commands. And we want to be specific that this command comes from your extension itself. The next one that we're going to look at is the menus object. And under this menu, we have a when command or a when object and also the group object. And this is important because this when contains regular expressions, and these regular expressions define where this command will be displayed. So for example, the first one, the get mass data, I want this to be displayed in a sequential dataset. And if we look at the Zowe Explorer extensibility documentation, it will show us the regular expressions for our contextual menus or contextual hooks. And here, I wanted the view for dataset and then the view item sequential. And with this, it will tell me that, this command will only show um, in the sequential part, or if I right click you in a sequential dataset. And the second part, or the second command that I want with set configuration, I want it in the profiles itself. I want it inside the sequential dataset and also in the profile. So again, I will use view for Zoe.export. It means the dataset tree view, and then the view item, I will just add session and then DS for sequential. I will also want it inside favorites, so I will have it there as well. And if you check also the group is also important. If in our documentation, we already reserve some of the group names for Zowe Explorer. So if you wanted to inject new menus, you need to use the numbers 100 and above so that your commands will go below the Zowe Explorer commands. So in here, I use 100 and then I use my extension name and then at 1 or at 0 what to define which the position of my command. So at 0 means it will be the start one, at 1 will be the next one. I also want you to check the extension dependencies. So for this category, I need to have a dependency with the installation of Zowe Explorer. And then of course the keywords. The keyword Zoe should be there. So in this category, I fulfilled the conformance criteria for a general extension and as well as the extension adding menus. All right, so let's look at the extension that we've created. So just to summarize, I have here my package.json, and I have the keyword Zoe right over here. I have my commands here, unique commands with my extension name. I followed the contextual hooks rules that we have for the Zoe Explorer extending documentation and as well as the grouping. With just this, I am almost, let's say, we're almost 90% conformant. We fulfilled the general criteria for the extension and as well as almost we're completed with the extending menus criteria. And our goal for today is to show that command and as well as get the node information from Zoe Explorer. So the node information meaning I will get the information from the tree itself and leverage that information to do what I want to do. So let's look at our extension file. And in here, I registered my command in VS Code that if I fire this command, I want to get this function. So how do you know that it is registered correctly? So I will check this command name. So this is what I should have defined in my package.json. So here is the command that I registered. This is the name. And that is the command that I will register command in VS Code here in my extension .ts. And if once I call this, I will call this function, this get mass data, which is right over here and get mass data. And this get mass data, our focus is to just call this get profile function. And so I added a breakpoint right over here. So I already played it. I already run the extension so we could debug it. And this is how it looks like. So once it is loaded, um, it so as you can see, I am leveraging the Zowe Explorer UI. I have the trees here. I have my profile here. I'm using this FTP profile to get or to read all of my extension. And when we define our command, what we said here is that the command will be displayed, the get mass data command will be displayed in a sequential dataset, and the set configuration will be displayed in a session or a sequential dataset. So let's try that out. So this is my session. My expectation is that the set configuration will be here. And there we go. We can click it. It will open up my settings.json, which is what I have defined in my code. And I have here a sequential dataset. If I right click, I have my set configuration and then my get mass data command right over here. How about if I try a PDS dataset? So here's a PDS, I right click, it's not there. So there's this when the when regular expression or the when clause there really works. And you can see that my set configuration comes first and when my generate mass data comes second. And that is because we defined it in our grouping that the mass data will come after the set configuration one. And so, all right, so let's do that again. So right click, and then I click on the generate mass data. So my expectation for this one is that if I click this, I will get the information from the node. So I will get the dataset name, I will get the profile information, everything from this tree, all of the information here, I should be able to get and leverage because I am using the extensible APIs that Zowe Explorer provided. So let's click. So there we go. We have a breakpoint right over here, and it says that my node is from iZoe dataset tree node, which is true. I have the dataset tree there. I right click there, and let's check out the node. So as you can see, the node here is that I used the command Zoe node open PS. For some reason, I have a label right over here, which is the config test. That's the dataset name. I have my profile information here. My cover, the profile is the zcobol FTP, which is type Z FTP. I have this information, which I could leverage. So if I press play here, I would be able to, let's say, submit a GCL using that profile information that I have here. But this doesn't work right now because I prevented it from working. And it's not just the FTP profile. I could also use my ZSMF profile. So whatever profile that I have here, I would be able to leverage that one and get all the information that I have because I am using um, the extensible API. So let's try it here in the config test too. So let's click on this generate mass data. And if you check the node again, see I have the zcobol and ZSMF profile type. And I'm using the config test too as the dataset that I want to use. And there you have it. So this is just a simple example, and this is a basic example on how to extend your how to extend Zowe Explorer and inject new menus into it, and then leverage the information or leverage the extensible APIs that Zowe Explorer provides. I hope that you will try it out after this session, and I hope that you will be able to, enjoy and um, experiment more with the features or the extensible feature that we are providing for Zowe Explorer.
So there you have it. We've gone through all of the Zoe Explorer conformance criteria items. So now we're going to help you get started with your own DIY extension. So first thing that we would recommend is to familiarize yourself with the Zoe Explorer functionalities. So we have a good documentation describing each of the functions and try it out yourself because only then will you be able to assess your use case. You can ask yourself the question, what functionalities do you want to extend and what APIs do you need? So we've discussed a lot of the Zoe Explorer extender APIs and you can decide which one of those you need. Or in case you find that we haven't implemented something, that's also a possibility for you to tell us and it's something for the squad to consider. So for each of those APIs, we have very good documentation explaining all of the features and possibilities for each of those APIs. You can refer to the code samples as we've described earlier. You can refer to our monorepo in GitHub. And within that repository, you will be able to see how the FTP extension was able to use the different extender APIs. So once you're familiar with it and you know the use case that you want to extend, you can start customizing. And again, we would really love your feedback. In case you have a use case we haven't considered, please do provide your feedback. Even if you're just asking questions or making suggestions, all of this participation and collaboration is very helpful for the community.
Well, that's it for us. Thank you so much for attending this session. If you have any question, please feel free to ask your questions. I've attached here some references. We have the Zoe Explorer references, the extending documentation, our conformance criteria, our contributing doc if you are interested in contributing to our repository, and of course, the link to our repository. If you want to know more or if you want to read about Zoe and other blogs, I have the Zoe website here and our blog site in medium.com. Thank you so much for attending and have a great day. I hope you learned something.
Thanks, everyone.